Class, I'm going to do a short video talking about the reading response questions and the papers after looking at two of your papers, and I'm in the process of looking at the lottery responses. So I just want to go over what you should be doing with this another time. I know I've talked about this before, but I really want to just concentrate for about 5 minutes on this little paper. So the purpose of this little paper is to get you comfortable writing about analyzing literature, not summarizing the plot, because that's pretty easy to do. That's a lower level on Bloom's taxonomy of learning. Repeating back like a plot summary is pretty simple. That's a lower level thought process. The reading response is asking you to analyze. So, let's talk about these 8 questions. And I really want to think about these questions and what you should be doing. And I've got a little sample to show you. So, you're only going to spend about 3 sentences on the plot. Just, if you had to say in 3 sentences what your story was about, that's what you're doing. Remember, always introduce. So in Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, published in 1948, she writes about and then spend about 3 sentences telling that story. Okay, so what I would do is answer all of these questions before you start writing it into the little paper. I would sit down and answer them all, and then turn it into a little paper. So, when you talk about character, you need to be explicit. The most important character, the prime character. You don't want to say the protagonist, because that's something completely different. A protagonist is a particular literary term. That protagonist is not usually something we question. It's a pretty obvious thing if we say this is the character in the story around which most of the action takes place. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the protagonist is the most important character. You could think the antagonist is the most important character. You could think a minor character is most important because maybe that character triggered something. So you want to explain which one you think is the most important character, and then you must explain why by using at least one example from the story. Setting. Now you're going to shift to setting. Where does it take place and why is this important? So, for example, in The Lottery, it takes place in the middle of the town square, and that's important because it shows what? It shows that this seems like some ritual that's a civic thing that happens every year and everybody gathers together, or it's where all these other civic things happen. So why is that important? I would say that these 3 things organically feel like they're related and could be combined into a single paragraph. Okay? You don't want to have one paragraph. This is not an 8-paragraph thing. You want 2 or 3 paragraphs. So these 3 things seem fairly organically connected, mostly. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's how I see it, You could have some other idea, but you want to connect your answers together. So then you shift into a different set of questions. So now you're going to pick out the most important word. You can define it, look it up, but you have to explain your choice, and you should probably pull out the quote in the story where it comes from. Okay? In The Lottery, you could just pick the word lottery and explain why. Well, it's in the title and it really directs the action of the story, or it implies it's very ironic. Anyway, you could have your reasons. So, but you pull it out, work it up. You can quote where it's used in the story, explain why you think it's important. Next, you shift into saying, okay, so the lottery was the most important word. The most important line is, and then you quote it, okay? and then give me your explanation why. You might want to connect it back to the most important word, or maybe it's completely separate and you want to say that. So again, in terms of connection, these things feel very connected to me. However, you might want to do 4 and 6 in a single paragraph, and then 5 is its own thing, and then 7 and 8 together. Or maybe 4, 5, and 6 all together. It's up to you. Okay, so then 6 is, again, if you could pick a word that wasn't in the reading, what best explains it? So if you say that, like if we go back to the pedestrian, you might say the most important word was conformity, or in this case, the lottery, maybe it's groupthink, something like that, because Shirley Jackson didn't use the word groupthink, but you say, well, that's clearly what it's about. Then what's the underlying meaning? Well, the plot of it is this, but what does it really mean? And then finally, what's the universal theme? Okay, so let me show you a sample reading response. This follows, I did this myself after I was thinking about what I was reading from y'all, and I was like, well, let me show them what I mean. So Shirley Jackson's The short story, The Lottery, follows an annual tradition in the small town where community members gather to draw slips of paper from a black box. Initially, the atmosphere appears festive and ordinary, with families congregating in the town square as they would for any other civic event. However, the story takes a dark turn when Tessie Hutchinson is singled out as the winner. Her initial lighthearted demeanor shifts. The town turns against her and stones her to death. Okay, so the story's unsettling conclusion reveals the town's blind adherence to tradition, showcasing the dangers of unquestioned cultural practices. So plot summary up to about here. Then this is going to get to the underlying meaning and theme of the story. So then this paragraph, I say, Tessie Hutchinson is the most significant character because she's the only one who directly challenges the fairness of the story. Unlike villagers who passively accept their roles, Tessie protests, exclaiming it isn't fair. So I explain why she's the most important person in the story. Then I shift into explaining the importance of the setting. The story takes place in a village square, a traditional location for community gatherings and celebrations. It's significant because it symbolizes the normalization of the stoning. Okay? So now I'm shifting into the most important word. I say it's the lottery. I explain why. And then I say directly after another essential line states the lottery was conducted, as were square dances. So I think this is the most important line. Finally, my final paragraph is I shift into a word not used. All the underlying meanings I put into one paragraph. I picked scapegoat, which should sound familiar after reading The Ones Who Walk Away from Omaha's. Then I talk about the underlying meaning of the story. While the surface level is this, the underlying meaning is really this. And then I finally wrap up by saying it's the theme of resistance to groupthink. And then that's it. So that's my page and a half, wherein I took my answers to these 8 questions and wrote them into 3 paragraphs. Basically, kind of combining these together, combining these together, and then these. And really that's all I'm looking for y'all, is so I don't want y'all to overthink it. It's taking these questions, answering them thoughtfully, and then writing them into about 3 paragraphs. Okay? Hope that helps.